and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Gabe Shenhar.
I'm Emily Thomas.
So thanks for joining us on podcast number 461. And Gabe, I know you're a fan of classic rock, 461 Ocean Boulevard, a classic Eric Clapton album. So I thought we would just kick that off with a traditional look at music and to a non-traditional look at a vehicle. So yeah, maybe EVs aren't...
Unplugged.
Yeah, unplugged. It's MTV.
Oh.
Now we're really dating ourselves. So what we're going to be talking about today is the 2024 Chevrolet Equinox EV. And this was supposed to be one of the more affordable EVs out there. At least that's what GM initially said. The 2024 model started at about $43,000, but the base price for the 2025 front-wheel drive LT version starts at about $35,000. So that's significant, especially considering the context of here at Consumer Reports. We've tested lots of high-end EVs, Mercedes, Audi, Rivian, Lucid, BMW. So it's nice to have the price come down a bit for the general
But
audience.
even in the mainstream EV, the certain center of gravity is certainly around 50,000.
Yes, but in the context of, the average price of a car, still a little bit high.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, what we bought is the 2024 model, the 2LT all-wheel drive version. This produces 288 horsepower with 285 miles of range, according to the EPA, and that starts at $41,900. We added a few options, such as the all-wheel drive package and Super Cruise, and the total came to $50,740. And for those of our audience that might not be familiar with Super Cruise, that's a hands-free driver assist technology that helps relieve fatigue and stress, such as on long highway road trips, automating some acceleration and steering functions. That's kind of the textbook definition. And the Equinox EV also has, a unique, and I say that in big, bold letters, infotainment system that we're sure you're going to want to hear about, so stick around. But for now, let's get into how it drives. And Mr. Shenhar, let's start with you.
Yeah, the Equinox EV is a very pleasant driving car. I mean, it's quiet, it's quick, it feels very effortless like many EVs, but also it rides comfortably. It has pretty responsive handling, which I'll stress because it actually feels more agile than the more upmarket and sporty looking, if you will, Blazer EV. So that's quite refreshing.
Yeah,
And
it's not as wide as the Blazer EV. So I think that also kind of helps. You don't feel like you're handling more of a boat kind of design.
That's certainly part of it. It's not as wide. Also, the steering is quicker. Instead of having a 3.5 turns between lock to lock, this one has only 2.8, which is more normal for cars nowadays.
Would you say that's normal across EVs and ICE vehicles? Okay.
Yeah. And I personally also think that it looks pretty good. It has a certain avant-garde kind of vibe to it.
Well, I think when we were talking about what we were going to say about the Equinox EV, the Blazer EV kept coming up, whether it's performance comparison or price comparison. That's still, a worthy discussion, right?
Oh, you bet. I mean, if you ask me, I think that the Equinox EV makes the Blazer EV irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
It's harsh. I think I put them all side by side in the shop to kind of do the comparisons, and you can definitely see the difference in width between the Blazer EV and the Equinox EV. Lengthwise, I think there is some difference, but it's kind of hard to see it until you get inside. When you're inside the Blazer cabin, you definitely feel like it's more roomy, and like the rear seat, for instance, has more room. The Equinox is a bit tighter back there. But even just looking at the cargo area, you would think that you might get more cargo space in the Blazer, and perhaps you do. It's just the dimensions are it's more of a wider rectangle back there, whereas in the Equinox EV, it's more square and deeper. So that part is different too. And I know initially, so there's also your regular gas engine Equinox, right? They haven't eliminated that model. And at first, I thought it was more like something like the Kona, where you have the Hyundai Kona, you have your gas version, you have the Hyundai Kona EV, you have, what else do we have? The hybrid version. But they're all the same. It's just you have different engine types, right? So you're basically getting the same vehicle. You know that when you get into them, they look the same, they feel the same, all of that. But that's not the case with the Equinox.
Completely different.
Right. It's like completely different platforms. You put them side by side, they look different. The EV is a little like squattier. It's lower. It's a little bit longer. And the most of my testing is in the rear seat, so I took a quick peek, and they look different there too. There's just the geometry of them is different. So I do think, for somebody who maybe is more familiar with your traditional Equinox, understanding that the Equinox EV is not just your same Equinox with a battery engine, right? It's a completely different platform. It's a different style. So going in without that preconceived notion is probably helpful too.
And you brought up, with the vehicles, because that's a big part of the testing that you do here in terms of fitting child safety seats and just in your own day-to-day life, hauling kids around. And are you finding at all that the Equinox is family friendly enough for your needs?
For us, yeah, we don't usually have to put 3 people in the back when we have families staying with us. Or over the summer, I had my father-in-law, so we were having to kind of max capacity our 5-seater vehicles, and so one of us would be in the back seat. The Equinox would probably be a little bit difficult to do that, to put an adult between the 2 car seats. But for both of my kids with their car seats, I have a forward-facing harness seat, and then I have a high back booster. It was easy enough to do the installs. The lower anchor accessibility is good. He didn't have a hard time buckling himself in for the booster seat and things like that. You have 2 charge ports back there, USB-C ports, so if you have older kids and they need charging access, right, that wasn't that bad either. Overall, I would say that certainly the Equinox EV has some of the changes that I'm hoping to see for rear seat safety, right? So they actually have a rear belt minder, which I love that they've implemented that. And it's easier, I think, to read on the Equinox EV than on the Blazer, because I had to move the cars yesterday. And so once again, in the in the Equinox EV, it's very clear that you're looking at the rear belt minder on the driver cluster, as opposed to the Blazer, where they just put like 4 of the little red belted icons next to each other, 3 of which are the rear passengers, and then 1 of which is the driver, but there's no differentiating. So it just looks like you have 4 people in your back seat, which is impossible. So
So it's not consistent across the board.
Consistent. But I like it better in the Equinox. They even added, the seatbelt pretensioners and load limiters for the rear outboard seating positions inside torso airbags. So you're able to have these, not torso airbags, but we do have pretensioners and load limiters in the outboard seats. And so for your older kids that are still sitting in the back, or your booster age kids that are relying on the vehicle system, if you have to put adults back there, they're getting additional safety, which is great. Right, that's one of the things that we've been advocating for a long time, and so being able to see that GM is putting this into the newer platforms that they're bringing out, it's making me very happy.
Well, that's what we do here at Consumer Reports. We sweat the details.
Yeah.
So Emily, I'm glad that you're all on top of that in terms of what they're doing for rear seat safety. Gabe, I want to ask you about the DC fast charging. It says it's compatible up to 150 kilowatts. Why is that competitive, or?
150 kilowatts and DC fast charging is not a standout these days. The Koreans, Hyundai, Kia, Genesis, are capable of doing it. They have an acceptance rate of 240 kilowatt, which almost matches that of Tesla at 250 kilowatt. But 150 is still competitive these days. But 170, 190. 200, we're beginning to see those numbers, and even in mainstream EVs. What that means is that if you plug in at Electrify America, focus on the 150 kilowatt stalls. You're not going to benefit from plugging into a 350 kilowatt stall because the car can't accept more than 150. So that's what you're going to do on a long trip.
Yeah.
On
ahead.
more commonly, home charging, in terms of AC charging, the car has a pretty robust onboard charger, 11.5 kilowatt. And what that means is that it can, combined with the efficiency of the vehicle in terms of its energy consumption, miles per kilowatt hour, it will take 33, 34 miles per hour of charging. So that's relatively speedy, actually.
Okay. Yeah. I was waiting for you to bring in how many miles you get for how much time, so we can get wrapped up in kilowatts and everything like that. So, okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And staying with sort of the techie side, let's get back to that infotainment system. For those who may not know, GM has been putting out a number of EVs these days, but it's without Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Gabe, I know you've called this a deal breaker. Mike Quincy does too.
So yeah, let's clarify.
The third
Emily Thomas does maybe.
Well, let's clarify that yes, GM only for some reason does it for Chevrolet branded vehicles. So the Equinox EV, the Blazer EV, the Silverado EV, all of these don't have built-in compatibility for Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And yeah, to me, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've gotten used to seamless integration of seeing Waze and Spotify on the screen without having to log on to and set up a Google account and logging into your Spotify separately. I mean, I know there are ways around that, but yeah, not having Apple CarPlay, yeah, I think it's a deal breaker for me.
Just, you bring it back to the Equinox. The Sweet Johnny Links, also known as John Linkove, a frequent contributor to this podcast, he wrote in the vehicle's logbook, he said, "I'm okay with the no CarPlay in the voice commands for the navigation system because they're natural language and the map is really clear. But since we have to set up a Google account, we don't have the ability to add Spotify or Waze, and you can't do any voice to text via iMessage. So it's still a giant fail." So that definitely is kind of putting the lid on that one. And when we were talking about,
I thought I was harsh, huh?
we're talking about, whether or not manufacturers should be doing these kinds of things. It reminded me of a meeting that we had with BMW recently, where they kind of like sheepishly said, yeah, we're kind of giving up the idea of charging owners to use their heated seats. And they were going to do a subscription fee for if you wanted to use your heated seats. Maybe they're actually seeing people don't really like that. So my question to you guys is, do you think GM is going to see the light on not allowing people access to Apple CarPlay and Android Auto?
We can hope.
It's a question for GM.
I mean, like, I think it helps if consumers use their voice, right? And they provide feedback to the manufacturer that, hey, this is the thing that I don't like about it, or, because they do take that kind of stuff into consideration. If you are a CR member and you can respond to our member survey, that would be a great place for you to put that kind of feedback, because then we also have that data and we're another lever that can be used to, influence the marketplace in that way. But, it feels like they try different things and they're like, oh, we'll see what sticks. And then
Did you really have to see if that was going to stick, though?
I don't understand the logic of it, because I feel like it's better. We all carry our phones with us, right? It's a better way to just pair your phone with a vehicle, cause less distractions. Even what John brought up about being able to like send messages, right? You don't want people sitting there and actually like trying to type a message on their phone. You want them to be able to use the voice to text. And that's far more seamless if you have an iPhone and you can just do it through the CarPlay rather than having to, I don't even know. You have to try to do it, or you're just going to give up and be like, okay, I guess I'm not doing this. Or now you're trying to talk to your phone separately, outside of the vehicle system. So we say don't use your phone while you're driving, but there are emergency situations where like you need to. And
Right. Well, let's put it to the talking cars audience. You think GM is going down the wrong path with not allowing Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. Let us know in the comments section when you watch this video. I have a feeling what people are going to say. They're probably going to push back. But to answer your question, why are they doing this? It's a subscription service. They want your data. They want you to pay for it. BMW wants another revenue stream, so we'll just charge people to use their heated seats. Turns out they're backpedaling on that, which is good. Okay, for manufacturers to say, well, we're reconsidering this position right now.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up on the Equinox EV, just to explain the $50,000 price that our version is, that there are two major options, $3,000 options. One is the all-wheel drive, and the other is the Super Cruise hands-free system. So that inflates the price quite a bit. But one word about the Super Cruise. I love Super Cruise, and it's a hands-free system that is highly regarded by us. Yeah, it's a major stress reliever, and I just think it's a game changer.
So just a reminder, these are first impressions of the Equinox EV. Check back with consumerreports.org for our first drives, and as we rack up the test miles and eventually have the test results. So now let's go to your questions. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Go to cr.org/talkingcars and let us know what's on your mind. And if we use your question on the podcast, we will send you a free t-shirt. Now, the first question is from Oren, who writes, I've been stewing on this gripe for a while now, and I'm wondering what your experience has been regarding the efficacy of auto-dimming rear-view mirrors. Personally, I've yet to drive a vehicle with one that works as well as a good old-fashioned flip tab that actually changes the angle of the mirror. So far, I've experienced the lack of effectiveness in Chevys, Fords, Rams, and Toyotas. The problem seems to be worsened by the ultra-bright LED headlights that you find in so many new models. To me, this seems like a case of new tech reducing safety for no good reasons. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So interesting question. And Gabe, you and I have been driving enough test cars over the years that we've seen, going from standard flips to the automatics. So what do you got for Oren?
I think these monochromatic mirrors have been around for at least a quarter century. And when I first experienced it, I thought, wow, this is great. I mean, this is the best thing since sliced bread. It relieves you from something you have to do when you have some high beams behind you.
Blinding you.
Yeah. So I think it's all good. But I can see some situations where the xenon headlights that are very white, not necessarily more intensity, but they're very white, can be a little distracting.
Mm-hmm. And the technology has evolved, and I almost got to the point where I was thinking about Oren's question, and I couldn't recall the last time we had a manual flipping rear view mirror. And then I got into it. We just bought a Nissan Kicks for the test program, and that has the little thing. It's like a flip phone. Emily, you have any opinions on these mirrors?
Quite frankly, they were working so well that I hadn't even noticed. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Because
two different types of mirrors?
Yeah. I mean, when I showed up for my CR interview, I had a 96 Corolla, so I definitely know what the flip tab is on my rear view. But with the newer cars, I just appreciate so much that the headlights are not blinding me as I drive. And it's like, oh, this is great. It's just doing it on its own. It works really well. I can see how maybe if you are driving in, Connecticut doesn't always believe in streetlights. And so I can see how it might make a dark area even more dark for you, right? With the auto dimming. But it's doing the job. It's what it's supposed to do, right? It's worse to have the headlights straight in your eyes. And like you said, rather than it being an additional step, it's doing it automatically, which I think is always a good thing in terms of like safety, right? I'm always for things that do it preventatively for you rather than forcing you to do an action.
So it's safe to say that that our experience with these mirrors are not necessarily in line with what Oren has experienced. They seem to work pretty well with us. So maybe Oren, you could try a few more models and see if you could come around. But sometimes you hold on to old tech, I guess. Sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Okay. Next up is Regina from Connecticut. Yay, Connecticut. While I'm not much of a car person, the CR team puts out such a well-produced, interesting podcast. I find myself interested in almost every episode. I have a 2016 Odyssey Touring with 110,000 miles and regularly go in for brake-related service, whether it's warped rotors or leaking calipers or general shaking and squeaking. Probably spend about $1,000 on maintenance just on brake-related stuff. My local shop says that the wear and tear is because we are constantly driving on hills with it, usually packed up with kids and sports stuff and everything family vehicles need to move around. We've been having our shop use OEM equipment. It's at the point where we're looking to replace it. Can CR suggest a family vehicle, preferably a minivan, that might do better in wear and tear on brakes? It sure seems like I'm the only one with this problem. So, Regina, I'm sure you're not the only one with this problem, but Gabe, I'm going to turn to you first. Not only do we live in Connecticut, but we also understand brakes and whatnot. So, what advice do you have for Regina?
Yeah, I don't think it's unusual. I grew up in a very hilly kind of place, and it wasn't unusual for people to have to replace brakes every 10,000 miles or even less. So that could certainly be par for the course here. As far as recommending a replacement for Odyssey, staying in the realm of minivans, it's pretty much a no-brainer with a Toyota Sienna. It comes only as a hybrid, or the Kia Carnival hybrid, which Emily did a wonderful video on. And with the hybrid regenerative braking, you can potentially save some braking, some friction brakes with that. So that should be an improvement for her.
Right. So family-friendly vehicle for Regina?
Yeah, I actually was going to go with the Sienna hybrid as well. Mostly because since she mentioned that she has the kids, it does really well for rear seat safety. It has rear belt minders. It has advanced seatbelt technology and the second row outboard seats, as well as side torso airbags. It has a rear seat reminder. It's pretty good for like child seat fit and booster access, things of that nature. So like no matter kind of what stage your child is at, it would be a good vehicle, especially as they grow up and they're using the seatbelt more. While I love the Carnival hybrid and I love the styling and the handling a bit better, I think if you already have the Odyssey, the Sienna will probably handle very similarly. Certainly in our ratings, their performance is pretty similar. I think the fuel economy is really good for both of them. Certainly for the Sienna hybrid. I was impressed. We took it for a family road trip and
You're stealing my thunder. Go ahead.
go and come back and not fill up once. It was awesome. But I do think the Sienna is probably a better fit given what it's equipped with for rear seat safety.
And just to add to what you guys are saying to Regina, and by the way, Regina, thank you so much for loving our podcast. We're getting a non-car person interested in our our podcast, which is really awesome. I would add the one technical aspect of all cars these days has this thing called engine braking, and on the transmission you usually have a little selection that says L stands for low. You might also have paddle shifters where you can shift down as you're going down a hill. The idea of engine braking is to take some of the pressure off of your braking system. And Regina, you're in the Northeast, so if you've ever been up to Mount Washington, which is a beautiful New Hampshire, and you get to drive up the mountain and see the views, there's signs all the way on the bottom that says use engine braking, put it in low. You'll burn up your brakes if you just ride them the whole way down. So you don't have to be on Mount Washington to remember to use engine braking on a regular basis, just for this idea of easing some of the pressure on the brakes. And for my pick for the best family vehicle, Toyota Sienna, 100%, 36 miles per gallon overall in our testing. Road trips, 600-mile cruising range. Wow.
Yeah.
That's not the what's the opposite of a deal breaker? A deal maker? I mean, that's the reason to get this
The green
vehicle.
flag.
I'm a super duper road trip guy, and I love driving the Sienna just for that cruising range.
Might be a bladder breaker.
Yeah, well, that too. I have to stop every once in a while. So yeah, and definitely, Regina, check out Emily's video on the Carnival Hybrid. She's awesome. Okay, batting cleanup. The last question we have for this podcast. This is Tin from Virginia who writes, with batteries being one of the most expensive components in an EV, why can't car manufacturers design EVs with interchangeable and upgradable batteries? For example, why can't they design a low-cost EV with a 150-mile range? After buying the vehicle, if your needs change, then upgrade the battery pack to a 300-mile range battery. Or as battery technology improves and cost decreases, you can upgrade to a more powerful battery pack. Just wondering if there are any technical hurdles that prevent car manufacturers from offering this feature. So Gabe, you really are one of our resident EV experts. So what do you have for Tin about this?
So if you've been in the EV scene for a while, you'll know that back in around 2007, there was a startup company called Better Place that their whole business model was battery swapping. And that was short-lived. It only lasted in very few places, Israel, Denmark, Japan. And it ultimately failed, and manufacturers just didn't. Manufacturers are loath to have their batteries, exposed to everyone, and batteries tend to be a structural part of the car itself, and there's no real incentive for manufacturers to really make batteries such a commodity. It's not cars are not phones or any other appliance.
Right, and there's a big weight difference between a large battery pack, a small battery pack, and Emily, you could touch on what you mentioned about the structural.
Swapping out the battery is a significant modification, right, to the vehicle, and it's going to have implications beyond just your increased range. So you're changing the weight of the vehicle, which could then change the vehicle's crashworthiness and its performance for compliance standards. So it's not something that you would want to do, which is likely why it didn't. That kickoff of that company did not last very long, because there's just so many safety regulations that manufacturers have to comply to, and making such a large change to the vehicle would have implications for many different areas. And so I don't really recommend it. I don't think that I think there's a good reason why manufacturers have not pursued that as an option.
Right. It is going to throw off the whole handling dynamics, crash structure, all that stuff. It's a neat idea. In theory, yes, Tin, we're with you. But in actual practical application, it isn't really going to work, at least not at this stage.
Yeah.
So that will about do it for this podcast, which was produced, of course, by super producer Dave Abrams and edited by Andrew I Still Play Hockey Belize and of course, Anatoly the Great Shumsky. As always, check the show notes for more information on the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Just a reminder, keep your questions coming. Please go to cr.org/talkingcars. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.